Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another webinar at AMC Banking headquarters. We hope you had some nice holidays and hope you're ready for another year and another webinar with us. So today we're going to talk about specialized automatch rules. And with me, I have my trusted coworker, Frederick, who is a technical sales advisor, who's going to take us through in finance and operations. And hopefully we're going to get some interesting stuff up and running. So like always, I'm your host, Kenneth Nielsen. I'm the marketing specialist at AMC Banking. If you have any questions during this webinar, you can always post comments on our webinar, and we're going to try to answer them at the end of this webinar. And like always, remember to follow us on LinkedIn and also our YouTube platform. So without any further ado, specialized automatch rules, like what is that exactly?
Thank you, Kenneth. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So last time we spoke a lot about these search strings, and I showed some different scenarios and what you can do with those. And that actually binds really well together with what we're going to talk about today, which is the automatch in general. So what is it? What can we do to tweak it to capture all these special payment instances? So starting from the top, let me share my screen here. The automatch in general, it runs every single time that we import a file, which will create a posting journal. So every time we have some data from the bank and the bank delivers us a file, I'll just import a local one here. Then this will create these posting journals and our automatch will run. So for many of you, this happens automatically when you have a direct communication, this data comes in. But as long as posting journals are created as here, then we'll attempt to find out who have paid and what they have paid. And to do that, of course, we run through a specific logic. So the automatch is the nice feature that colors all your transactions out here, hopefully with green, saying these can be posted and they have already been settled against invoices. They're ready to post. So the file I just imported doesn't match very well, at least not by default. So for many of you out there, you're using our default match rules, and there's nothing wrong with those. They are made for the 90% of customers. But what we're going to look at a little bit today is the non-default ones, ways to tweak it, add extra rules to capture other types of transactions that might come in. So that means a big part of where we're going to work is in the AMC Banking setup and automatch in here, where I can tweak my rules and build something which is a little bit more customized to my specific needs. Good. So the match rule setup, again, for many of you, this will be empty. If it's empty, it just means you use our default rules. However, if I do press new and I give it a name, press save here, then first of all, again, our default rules, we'll go through those in a second, they'll pop up here. And we also have a few parameters, which I'll also talk a little bit about. Good. So a match rule like this takes effect if I add it to my bank account, meaning just creating one and changing the priorities or adding rules doesn't do anything until I go into my bank accounts, open my bank account, and add this match rule setup here. And of course, as many of you can already see, that means that I can have different match rules for different bank accounts. Although that wouldn't normally be necessary, but maybe one per country or one per bank might be beneficial. So while we are here, I also want to show you down here that the automatch, we can actually also set it up to run in different companies. So that means right now, this bank account exists in my German company, but I can actually allow it to also search for open invoices in another company. And maybe before we jump into the auto match, let's just show that example. Let me save here, go back to my posting journal here. And I have one payment down here, this one. So the way it was before, it couldn't match to anything. We have a name and address. We even have something here that looked like an invoice number, but the system couldn't find anything. If I run the auto match one more time, after I allowed it to look in other companies, what should happen is that I get a high match, and it's actually settled towards a invoice in another company. So you need to explicitly allow it to do so. It also has a bit of a negative impact on performance. But if you are the type of company that might receive payments on behalf of your other legal entities, then you can allow the auto match to search through those as well. And if I post this, then of course all these intercompany accounting will be done to close the invoice over in my French company while posting the amount on my bank account here in Germany. Simple, easy. All right, let's jump back into the auto match rules and just quickly jump through some of these default priorities. Now, the very first thing is the search string. This is what we talked about in our last webinar. So this is the number one priority. If a user have created a rule for this transaction, then this takes precedent over any other match that we might do. So that means that even if there might be an invoice number or something else on the transaction, if you have a search string, a user created rule, then that is what will match. All right. So the other ones are end-to-end ID. That's the nice match rule that matches all of your outgoing payments. So all of the transactions you have in your payment journal that comes back again on your statement. They have a little unique ID called end-to-end ID. And this is what is used to match those. Now, when we're talking about these match rules and priorities, I mean, we need to keep a few things in mind. We want to not search for things that we know won't be found, because that's just a waste of effort generally. We want to search wide enough to find the right match, but we also really want to minimize the risk of these false positives, right? A match which wasn't correct. Now, looking at the next one, this is actually one for direct debit. And this is where many of you could actually do an improvement if you're not using direct debit. Because there's absolutely no reason why you should search for these external direct debit accounts through the system if you're not using a direct debit today. So removing this from our list would actually boost the performance of the auto match a little bit, because we're not looking for that which we know won't be there anymore. Good. The next two are payment ID and invoice numbers. Payment IDs, of course, being these payment references. Again, this is somewhere if you're working in countries which don't normally use payment IDs, like UK or US, then it might not make sense to search for payment IDs at all. So again, you could boost the performance a little bit by not searching or trying to match on items that you know won't be there. So these three here, end-to-end, payment ID and invoice numbers, are the ones that gives you a high match, a green match, right? It's something unique to the settlement, and as long as the amounts are correct, then you'll get green, ready to post and everything. The last ones we have down here are the ones where we recognize who have paid. So if it's a customer, we search for, as we can see, customer account. Do they write their F&O account somewhere? Search for their name. We also have the alias of the name, and we have the customer bank account. So the customer bank account, of course, requires both that I have this information in my F&O, but not only that, also that the bank delivers it to us in their account statements. Not all countries does that, but it's done, for example, in Norway a lot. This alias here, if I just open up one of my customers, the alias can be used. It's the search name that we have down here. It can actually also be used in situations where, you know, the bank might know your customer as something else, or more importantly, in the scenarios where there's some special characters, right? Like, Scandinavian AO or something like this, and the bank can deliver that data. So just write an O. So you can use the search name to kind of have an alias or an alternative name for that customer, which matches whatever the bank provides in the file, and then we'll have no problem finding it on the name. But very similar to that, I've also seen a few customers that have too narrow search names, so might only have, let's say, corporation or something like this, and yeah, that would be too vague. There's a risk of again a false positive where we match on something which wasn't actually this customer here. So the right balance, it's okay to change limited to LTD in a search name or incorporated to INC, but don't make them too small, or we might match on something unintentionally. Good. So those are the default rules that we go through. Every time, all of you probably have these ones, unless you've already tweaked them. Now, let's look at some of the parameters that we have up in the top, something that we can add to kind of change the logic a bit on how things are matching. So the first one is called match partial payment. And there's a long text that tells that it's sorting open customer invoices and attempting to find sequences of invoices. It's a little big. I think it's easier if we look at a scenario. I'm going to enable it here and go back to my posting journal. I'm going to open this one up, and we'll look at the very first payment that we have here. So looking at the details we got a name and address. That's pretty much everything that we got from the bank. And if we check the log out here with a low match, it says, all right, well, we found the customer. We use name, the material name, to find the customer. But the paid amount does not match any of the found invoices. Now, if I press settle transactions down in the bottom, I can see all the invoices for this specific customer. So I could play around a little bit and see, all right, well, let's see, it's 7,726. It's these two invoices down here that are being paid. Now, of course, this is something I could do manually, but now that I've added this match partial payments parameter, then if I run the auto-match again, auto-match transaction, it changes to medium. And even though we only match with name, we actually found the two invoices that there was. Now, this in particular, or this particular example was fairly simple. There were 3 open invoices. However, one should note that if this was 100 open invoices or something, then it will take time to run through them, right? Because it basically tries to sequentially add up the amounts to see if there's something that fits what they have paid here. So if it's 100 invoices, that's a lot of different tests we need to make to see if the amounts are right. So I would be a little bit wary about turning this on. It's completely fine, of course, if you know that you have scenarios where customers pay multiple invoices, but don't give you the details of what it is that they have paid. Because if they have written their invoice numbers out here, then I wouldn't need it. We could easily match this and find it. This is only for the case where we had a medium match, right? We recognize the customer that paid, and then we try to determine what they've paid by adding invoices together. So use this function. It can be great if this is a realistic scenario for you, because then you can save some time, of course. And in terms of all these things I mentioned about performance, a lot of you, of course, have direct communication. And for our enterprise customers, you have batch jobs that just imports these data. So it runs through the night. And in those cases, it's a little less important with the performance, because it can run all throughout the night. Okay, back to my auto-match here. And we have another one called split multi-customer payment. So what the scenario is here, who is it relevant for? It is if you receive a payment on behalf of another customer. So if we go back to our posting journal here, I just turn this on, check out this one here. Okay, so let's see. I've received a payment. We have a low match. It basically says, all right, there's an invoice number, then it says payment on behalf of WWI, and then I recognize it as another invoice number. So these are two different invoices for two different customers. Of course, once again, I could, of course, press settlement, show all. I could filter by invoice numbers. It's one of these two here, and I can mark these two if I want. If I do that, the system will split it out into these two customers and do it if I want the control myself. But the parameter I just set was a split multi-customers payments. So if I auto match the transaction once again, boom, 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 it actually splits it up into 3 lines. We have one, which is our bank transaction. That is what will be posted on my own bank account, 10,120. And then it's split it up, the next two, into 2 separate customers. They all have the same voucher numbers, so you can keep track. And there's a little triangle out here saying, oh, wait, the original payment here was split into multiple transactions due to this multi-account settlement. So again, if you are in the scenario where one of your customers might pay on behalf of other customers, this can be a really nice tool. So you don't need to split things up manually, but just have the system do it for you. Notice that the system will only do this automatically if you have a high match, right? An invoice number that matches the amount and everything. Good. All right. Going back to my auto match, the last one is called skip medium match. Don't use that one. I don't know why you would. That would skip the bottom 4 here. Maybe if you enjoy manual work, you can skip those so you can handle those yourself. Shouldn't need it. Okay, there are actually a few other things that I can add to this list here if I want. So if I press new, we can just quickly run through a few scenarios of special auto match rules, which are not in by default, but which you can add if it is something you want. So the first one is called advance invoices. This is actually a new one. If you know what it is, you know what it does. Advance invoices are used a lot in Eastern Europe. It's kind of a pre-payment invoice register, and this looks through this register for invoice numbers of that account. The bank-to-bank delete duplicate. This can be a little bit special to understand. So if you're doing intercompany payments, and you're from the sender company, you're paying from one company to another, and from the sender, you're posting it directly on the receiver bank account. If you do that, which of course you can, then when it comes in on the receiver end, it shouldn't be posted. It should just be deleted. And this match rule here can verify that and just delete it for you. So there's no risk that you accidentally post this twice. A counter to this is that both the sender and the receiver posted on a middle account that is settled in the middle. So this is used if you're making intercompany payments from one company to another and posting directly on the receiver and enter bank account as a bank-to-bank posting. Good. Collection letters. If you send collection letters to your customers who didn't pay, then it might be that your customer will reference that specific collection letter or the collection letter payment ID in the payment that they're making to you. So instead of referencing the original invoice, they reference now that collection letter ID. So this searches through open collection letters and finds the correct invoice based on that. So this might be relevant for you if you, first of all, use collection letters, and secondly, notice that your customers might reference those collection letters instead of the original invoice. Good. Now we have let's take this one, invoice numbers only, numeric only. So if you have your invoice numbers starting with a prefix INV or whatever, this will search through only using the numbers. So you can get a high match if the numbers are correct. This you should only use this if you have long numbers on your invoice numbers, again, to make sure you don't reach that false positive. All right. Just a few more before we jump into questions. We have our own account at customer site on your own customers. If I say this one here, on our own customers, if I open one of my customers here, then on the customer card, a little bit down under sales order default, you have an account number. That's your account number, your vendor account number at the customer site. If you add that match rule and add something to this field here, we'll use that to match as well. And it can also be misused if you have something else that needs to be matched in that field. And let's see, is there anything? Yeah. Also, normally for vendor invoices or vendor payment IDs, I mean, in our world, most vendor invoices are paid through the payment journal. And that also means that it's matched through this end-to-end ID. But that's not always the reality. So if you have vendors that either collect money from your account or you pay something manually in the bank or through another system, then you can enable it to also match vendor invoices, which is actually not there by default. It needs to be turned on. So either vendor payment IDs or vendor invoice numbers. All right. Now, there are some more, but they have more to do with places where the bank have misplaced some of the data, and it should look a little bit different. So as the last thing here, whoops, just deleted it by accident. Whoops, here. The last thing is we have something called match class. This is not something you should select something in, but this is something where AMC can deliver special logic for you as a customization. So we have a lot of customers that need some very special matching, whether it's splitting up based on different needs or marking sales tax or whatever it is, or matching on customized fields that they have in their system. So it's just to say that it's built to be extended using this match class. So if you have anything specific, you're more than welcome to reach out, and we can do a little scope session and see if we could deliver some specialized logic for you if needed. Good. And I think as a last comment here, in our user guides that comes with from Lifecycle Services, where you get our modules, you can also see our AutoMatch and application that goes through all of these rules and explains them and say where we search and what kind of match it would then end up with. So my advice, it's really, really good to know that some of these exist, because then you can, every time you see something in your posting journal, you might figure out, oh, but we can maybe change that with this, or it's because they only wrote their numbers and their invoice numbers or something. But don't go too crazy. Don't add all the rules at once and change around on all the priorities. Notice that it's working today. Go slow, add a rule, see if it works, and things like that. And of course, this can be a little bit complex to balance all of these things. So, of course, our consultants are experts at this, and it might make sense to book a session or something where we go through your rules, look at your data, see if there's something we can do to improve it.
Thank you, Frederik. That was good timing. 5 minutes left. Should we go through some questions?
Yeah.
See, Henrik asks, do you record this webinar so it's possible to watch it later? Yes, we do. You should also receive a recording of this by mail afterwards. If not, we also put this up on YouTube. So if you don't follow us on YouTube, I strongly recommend you do. Also remember to follow us on LinkedIn, because this is usually where we post about new webinars. Also join our newsletter, of course. Anna asks, is matching parameters across countries or by country?
So the match rule setup here is actually added to a single bank account. So meaning you can create one. I created one called test, and you can decide which bank accounts that they are added to. Here in match rule setup. Whether that's actually a global table, I have forgotten. Let me just try to change over to another company. Do I still see my tests is the question. I do. So it's a global table, but it's activated by adding it to a bank account.
Great. She also asked, what if you had a bank fee in that payment?
I mean, we should almost do another webinar just on bank fees. So this is an incoming payment that we've looked at. We've only looked at incoming payments today. So whether or not we have a bank fee or whether or not we can handle a bank fee, actually it requires, or it depends on what information that we get from the bank. So as a rule of thumb, if it's your bank that's taken the fee, you got an international payment in another currency, your bank says, I'll take a fee from that because we needed to convert it or something, then they are able to give us information about what has happened. Meaning they might say, oh, you received 100 euro, but we took 5, so we put 95 into your account. If we get that information, then we'll add that fee into your posting journal completely automatically, and you can add a search string to match it to a fee account. But if it's the sender bank that have given you or that has taken this bank fee, then all we know is that you received an underpayment. You received too little, and we don't know why or what. And in that case, you would get a low match because the amounts are not correct. If it's outside of your penny difference accepted tolerance, then it would need a user interaction.
And finally, can you have ledger matching directed by beneficiary name?
Ledger matching by beneficiary name. So ledger matching. So I mean, we've only looked at incoming payments. So beneficiary name would be our name. It might be on. I think the most important thing here is that for ledger matching in general, no matter which ledger it should go on, this is not using our auto match rules. This is done using search strings. So you can create whatever rules that you want, saying whenever I see Northwind Traders here, or whenever I see specific text, you can put it to a specific ledger account. But this is done using search strings. And if you're unfamiliar with search strings, I recognize watching our last webinar where we went into details on that.
Yes. Great. We have 2 minutes left, so now is the time for any final questions, if you have any. Else I can just add a final note that our next webinar is going to be about another compliance, about the NIS2 directive, or NIS2. I don't know how you pronounce it. NIS2, I think. So I highly recommend you join that. Yeah, doesn't seem like we have any more questions.
Perfect. Well explained.
Yes. If you have any questions, you can remember, you can always write to us at info@amcbanking.com. Oh, we actually have one here from Pernille.
AMC Banking setup auto match. You might need to be a setup manager as your security role.
Yes. And also Britt asked, the question related to bank fee was asked during your demo of the split with one payment with 2 different customer invoices.
One payment with 2 different customer invoices. Yeah. Well, the same details actually apply. So if we get the information that a fee was deducted from your bank, then it shouldn't be a problem. But if we see this as an underpayment, meaning we don't know that this fee, or we didn't get structured information that this fee was taken, then we wouldn't do the split because the amounts needs to match before we'll automatically split to 2 different customers.
Great. Well, we're out of time, people, but thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time. So thank you for joining us, and have a good day.
Bye.